Welcome to another episode. Oh, my voice already this morning. Another episode of Make Mental Health Matter, where I talk to guests who are either professionals in the mental health space, advocates of mental health, or those that have lived experience with mental health or substance use. And Mondays really are all about bringing the resources to you as the audience because as we all know, in the mental health space, there are just not enough resources or we don't know about them. And that is really the whole goal of why I bring on the guests that I have on, especially Mondays, so that you are able to understand what resources are out there, what people specialize, what they do, and then also giving you those tools, resources, understanding any tips or tricks that my guests have. So, as a reminder, if you are watching this for the first time, I guess it's not a reminder if it's the first time, but if it is your first time, mash down that subscribe button if you happen to be watching on YouTube. If you are watching on any of the TV streaming platforms like E360 or any of them, add this show into your wish list, your watch list, whatever it's called, so that you don't miss another episode. Because I promise you, and I know I say this all the time, but really, truly, every single guest that I bring on are just so incredible. I don't want you to miss out. So, without further ado, I am going to bring my guest up for today. Krista, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So just start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a licensed professional counselor candidate here in Colorado. And then I'm also a licensed mental health counselor in New Mexico. So I offer telehealth for New Mexico clients. But I'm a sports mental health counselor. So I work with athletes and coaches and affiliated personnel like chiropractors, PTs, kind of people that are in that realm. And I do also offer mental performance coaching. So I kind of do both. I have like two separate businesses in one, like the counseling on one side or the mental performance coaching on the other. So it's really fun. It's really busy.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
So I know you and I have talked in the past and we had a wonderful conversation, but I tell just a little bit more like what does that really mean like as a mental health performance coach?
Yeah. So when we talk about, it's funny because I had this question actually this weekend. So when we talk about like the coaching, we're kind of looking at the here and now and like any, performance barriers, plateaus. One of my mentors calls them the yips, and I love that. So like any performance yips and like kind of what's going on right now, and then how can we work on the now and then go forward. And then when we talk about the counseling, we're kind of looking more in the past and like on the back end of things, kind of what has happened to get you to now. So, if a client comes in and there's some trauma there, I'm probably going to recommend we work in the counseling space. That way we can address some of like the things that have occurred. So I specialize in trauma, PTSD, depression, and anxiety. And so, PTSD is kind of and trauma is kind of like a blanket. Can cover so many things, right? And so when we talk about athletes or, people in the sports world, that could be sport related, could be like an injury, like maybe there's an injury on the field and every time they get back out on the field, even though they're cleared to go, there's still some kind of like somatic experience, like in their body, they're just kind of like, tensing up or something, there might have been some trauma there. And so we kind of work on that. Or maybe it's, trauma with a coach or, kind of all the things, right? It doesn't have to just be what I think we put trauma and like depression in these kind of like boxes. And like, if it doesn't look like that, then we don't think it is that. So just kind of like navigating, what might be those for that person, and then, working through those and then addressing it as it pertains to their life and performance. So the counseling is a little bit more complex, but that's what I like. That's why I became a counselor. And then the coaching is kind of like, hey, I just really need some like help getting through this current like barrier, or I can't get out of my head or something. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think, I mean, the important conversation that I know you and I were talking about too is because I really wanted to understand like brain trauma. Brains are so fascinating to me,
Yeah.
right? And when you talk about athletes, my brain automatically goes to like head trauma. And
Yeah.
I like how you just talked about also it could be trauma with a coach, it could be trauma with, I mean, the situation happened as an athlete, and it's not like you just pop right back up and you're
Yeah.
perfectly fine, right?
Right.
There's this process that your brain has to go through
Right.
because you are now kind of in that fight or flight mode of, if I
Yeah.
do that again, is that going to happen again? And
Right.
I think that's what athletes don't talk about enough, is like, we as spectators want them to just get up and move on with it. But
Yeah.
what we need to understand is that there's so much more that goes into, whether it's brain trauma or body trauma or
Right.
just situational, excuse me, situational trauma.
Yeah.
And so I think that's cool that you have both like dynamics, the coaching and then also like being a performance on the performance aspect too.
Yeah, yeah, you're so right when you say like as spectators, we just expect people to like get back up and go, right? And I think that's kind of like the narrative that, sports are cutthroat. It's really like, okay, if you're not going to do it, someone will replace you. And I think that narrative is kind of taught pretty young too. It's not just like, the major leagues or, it's, you kind of know, like, this is a really competitive field, competitive profession to go into. And so there's also this, like, I think internal pressure of, you know, there's so much that ties into it with like the pressure of, if I don't do this, then maybe someone will take my place. But there's also a pressure of like, who am I without this too? And am I going to let these people down? Would I let myself down? There's just so much pressure in the sports world that, even coaches, like I work with coaches, and there's that saying, like, you parent how you were parented unless you've done some work, or, and, I coaches, like, it's the same thing. If you had just really, challenging coaches your whole athletic career, and you're like, I'm going to be different, it's really hard to just say that, and without having some, either slip ups or like really not even being aware that you're kind of coaching that way, and so just really kind of helping coaches even work on their own experiences, I think is so rewarding, because then they can go out and just, be an example to all these kids or these other players if they're adults, and so I love working with coaches too in that, because coaches have the pressure too. There's the pressure there that, well, if you're failing as a team, no one's going to be like, oh, it's fine, that coach, whatever. There's pressure on them too. So yeah, I definitely think it's very complex for sure. But you're right, like head trauma is so fascinating. And I definitely would love to continue learning more on that for sure if I have more time. But yeah, head trauma, we always think of like the physical traumas that athletes face. And we don't, it's like easy for us to be like, oh, they tore their ACL, so they're going to be out for 6 weeks and they're going to be around the team and at practice, but they're not really going to be doing much. But if someone's going through like maybe a depressive episode or something in their life, it's a little bit looked at differently than, I think organizations are getting better at supporting athletes, but it's still kind of this narrative of like, well, your body's working, so can you get back on the field? Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that just made something pop up into my head too, is even those that do get hurt, say they tear um something, right, that causes major surgery and they have to be out for so long. There is also that backside of I can't be on that field. Now they could potentially go into a depression,
Yeah.
which leads them to not want to play
Yes.
or whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
And I also love that you talked about the coaches is we as society, I feel like we put so much pressure on them. Of course, we're like the players are like the thing, but the coach are the backbone.
Yeah.
And if you think about it in a family manner, right? Like the parents are the backbone, like you were
Yeah.
talking about. And if you are raised in a certain household that maybe was abusive and you really
Right.
want to break that cycle, but you can't do it without getting help
Yeah.
first. You can't just
Mhm.
say, well, my parent was abusive, I'm not going to be abusive. We
Right.
still have those things that get ingrained in our brains and in our body. And
Right.
same goes with athletes and coach, is that and I didn't never thought of that till you said it too, is like those coaches, if they had crappy coaches back in the day, they're
Yeah.
probably that's what they are conditioned to, and then it will translate into what they do. And that even popped into my head, even like leadership wise,
Yeah.
in corporations.
Yes.
And if you had a really crappy leader before, that's what you know and what you're going to output into the next thing. And so I
Yeah.
think that's important for people to hear, especially, I mean, as related to athletes, as related to relationships, leadership, all of those things. That's a really great point, is that we tend to model the behaviors that were modeled to us, but we need to insert potential coaches, licensed clinicians,
Mhm.
whatever that looks like for that person to be able to break that cycle, to start a new fresh cycle. And
Yeah.
so that's a great conversation too.
Yeah, and I think too, there's like the other side of the coin would be like the coach or the athlete that comes in and they're like hyper, like they're the complete opposite, right? And almost to a point of like not like, oh, I've done this work and I'm done this my own healing work and like all this stuff, but almost like I will never be like that person, and is coming from this like place of like anxiety and like so much work going into making sure that they are not the coach that they had or the the like experience that they had, and so then they're just like constantly on fire and like constantly running and probably going to be real burnt out soon if not already, but that's like the opposite side of that is like kind of just going into the pattern that you grew up with or that you experienced, and then the other side being just working so hard to be the complete opposite. And I think both are exhausting for your limbic system because when you're like acting out something that was hurtful to you or even traumatic to you, that's exhausting. And then when you're trying so hard to avoid that like stimulus or that like personality or whatever, that's also exhausting. So it's just kind of this interesting dynamic of, yeah, like coaches are so fun. I love working with coaches. Are great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was just also thinking, as you were saying, is that when we I've always heard the saying, where your attention goes, your energy flows.
Mhm.
And if you are working on not being what that is, you're actually working to be that,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
your energy, so much of your energy is going towards that thing of not being it.
Mhm.
But I have also learned about the brain is that we don't process the negative. So like we don't process that not part. We only process the what it is around it. So like you said, is if you don't want to be that person, you're focusing the energy so much on that person
Yeah.
that you're actually drawing it in,
Yeah.
which is not what we want. So
Right. Like like the brain, if there's like a shiny red light in front of you, we can't just be like, it's like right in front of you. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
it's
awesome.
hard to end the conversation. So opening up these conversations with the coaches, with athletes, how does that process really start for you?
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because I'm actually kind of learning a lot about how, shifting some of the way that I approach it. Because what I'm finding is a lot of my clients that I work with are actually not even aware that they might be like, so if we're working the coaching, they know that they have like a performance barrier, or maybe they're just like, hey, I feel like I'm doing all the things, and so I just want to make sure, like I work with some MMA fighters or jiu-jitsu athletes, and maybe they're doing all the things, but they're just like, I really want this fight in the bag. Like, I don't want to take any risks. So I'd like to, add this in or something. So typically on the coaching side, I think a lot of people come in with either goals in mind or like an understanding of where they're at a little bit. And then with the counseling, I think that's where it gets a little bit more like, most people don't come to me and they're like, hey, I have PTSD or like I have clinical depression, like, and so I think for that, it's that, people are noticing I'm not feeling great, or I'm noticing I'm not myself, or, I had this experience and it was a lot. And so maybe I should talk about it with someone. So, I think it's a little bit kind of understanding on the clinical side, just really putting the story together and letting them kind of, I never like, my approach to counseling is that like the person knows what they need, but life happens and we get confused and we get blocks and we don't understand how to really, maybe there's something blocking us from knowing that, and so I'm never like telling my client like, oh, well, if you just do this you'll be fine. It's more of like a like shift of like helping them find what they need, because I don't live in their life, and so what might work for me is probably not going to work for them, or maybe it does, but really just helping them navigate that and really kind of finding the language around like, oh, I am noticing I'm withdrawing, or I am doing these things. I am. And then, as a counselor, I can provide like, hey, we're kind of dealing with some depression. Like, this is what depression can look like, or, but I'm not going to tell the person like, oh, you're definitely sad or you're definitely having anger outbursts or things like that. So I think really on the counseling side, when they come in to me, it's more of just this work of like, what is going on with me, and why, like, what's going on, why am I feeling this way, or what is affecting my daily life. And so it's more upfront with the coaching, kind of like, hey, I lost my last fight, or my hitting is off, or I can't land this thing in gymnastics or something. I don't, whatever sport are working with. It's very like cut and dry, but I think the counseling is a little bit more like, I need to figure this out. And it's a little bit more coming from a place of like, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think I that's why I love what you do, because you have kind of both sides
Yeah.
to how you can help somebody. You can be more in that direct like coaching side, or you can be more in that guide as a counselor. So
Yeah.
what really got you into this work originally?
Yeah, so I was a personal trainer coach, and I worked with like all kinds of athletes throughout my time as a coach. And I was working in a really awesome facility in Albuquerque, and I was just like around these coaches that just, they're working with, elite athletes, and they, I'm learning so much from them, and, we're doing these trainings. I'm, just learning so much. And so I started my master's in coaching and exercise science. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to be this, I kind of really wanted to be the Broncos' first female head strength conditioning coach one day. And I was like, this is the goal. I'm sorry, I have like a huge truck outside.
No, you're good.
But, and this kind of what started the journey. And I have no idea what is happening. That's so loud. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm kind of crazy. But that started the journey. And as I was like in the program, I started and working, I was like, I love strength conditioning. It's awesome. And I love learning from strength conditioning coaches. Like, it's amazing. But I was like, this isn't why I do this. Like, I don't do this. Like when I'm programming, I'm like, on my computer, like, okay, got to get all the planes, got to get, they have a knee thing going on. I got to get, I'm sitting there, and I was like, this isn't really my jam. And so I started just kind of leaning into people around me and really trying to figure out, like, is this what I want to do? Do I want to go into, it's just like sports for athletes, like, strength conditioning coach, like that world is rough too. Like you're working long hours, not a lot of pay, and you're really giving a lot to the team. And, I'm a mom, I got kids. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. So I just kind of shifted. It kind of lined up as crazy really fast. But I just noticed that it was really hearing my clients' stories and learning about their life, and just like being a place of support for them, and like, and a way to like, just be there for them, like hold space for them. And I was like, oh, I like this. And then really just seeing how athletes, coaches, affiliate personnel, they're people first, and we place athletes and coaches, like we just said, on this pedestal, but really they're people, they're us. They experience life, and they experience loss and depression and injury and retirement and, divorce or relationship issues. And so that was really where I was like, oh, you know what? I know enough people got it handled over here. And I think this is where I need to go. So that's kind of how I switched, and just kind of I never looked back. It's been awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a quick sponsored break, and then I want to come back and just chat a little bit more about maybe some tools that we can give anyone that might be watching that really is more in the athlete space. So we'll be right back after this sponsored break.
Hi everyone, I'm Andy.
And I'm Minna.
We're the hosts of Chronically Healthy Life.
Join us Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time on Vitality TV to see how we flip the idea of chronic on its head and create chronic health in our bodies, minds, finances, and relationships right here on E360 TV.
And like that, we're back.
I love that. It's so cool.
Thanks.
Getting into the music.
Right? Yeah. No.
Right.
Well, if you are just joining us now, we are talking about really athletes and how Krista really is more into coaching and counseling for the athletic space. And as people that may play sports or be sporty, whatever you want to call yourself, I guess an athlete is the best word. Oftentimes we just don't think about the backside of the trauma that whether we put on our bodies or we put on our mind. And it all encompasses this idea around being able to mentally help ourselves. And again, I said earlier, but what I love that you do is you have this counseling aspect that you can be a guide, but then you also have this coaching aspect that you can really be straightforward and dive into whatever problem or challenge that they're wanting to get a solution based off of. And I know you talked about really wanting to lean into the community around you to figure out what you want to do with the degree that you went after. And you really found this incredible space of athletes because there's just not enough resources for them either. And that's why I think it's so important, again, what you do. And I know that you do work with several different places in Colorado, and the Broncos is one that you had always wanted to get into.
Yeah.
So
I love the Broncos. I don't work with them.
No.
I know. I went to they had a DEI event, which was so awesome. And I just love that the Broncos are like so active in a lot of those areas. So yeah, I would love to work with the Broncos. I don't work with them though. So I'm not going to.
If anybody's watching,
Put that out into the universe.
Tell the world. Yes.
I have like a joke with my clients. Like if you see me, like, intake session, you're doing all like the paperwork and like all the, informed consent and things like that. I'm like, I'm going to add in there, if you see me at a Bronco game, you did not see me. Like, just don't engage. Like, just let me be not your mental coach or counselor at that time, No, yeah, for sure. Yeah. I love that. Or, Denver has so many, Colorado has so many organizations. And I think what I'm seeing is just, there's a lot of efforts being put out there in a lot of the organizations to provide spaces for their athletes. And, I think coaches get kind of left behind. And even I say affiliated personnel, and oh my gosh, this truck, what a bad timing, Kelly.
No, you're all good.
This is my bad. But I say, affiliate personnel because, the physical therapists, the like doctors, the, athletic trainers that are on the field, they're in it too, and there's things going on too. And they're, and even like in, going to this Broncos event was so cool because it was kind of like a career huddle. So it was about, helping people understand different careers with the Broncos, which was super awesome to learn about. And, just even like ticket sales, like the pressure there, like, we kind of hone in on like the performer and we kind of forget about what it takes to allow space for the performer. So yeah, it was so great. I love working with all these, or just learning from all these organizations for sure in Denver. Yeah.
Well, and I was just talking to somebody, I forgot who it was, but they're like, I really wanted to go to a state that had professional sports. And I was like, well, welcome to Colorado because we have all of them.
Yeah, right. For sure. Yeah. I think, I'm going to say this loosely because in the past year, it has not been as consistent as I would love it to be, but I do jiu-jitsu. It's there. It's happening. I will always do it. So, I think it's going to be, that's what I love about jiu-jitsu is that it's a sport that is so individual. It's not about like there's a team aspect to it, but like it's so about your own process, and your own growth and your own like experience. And so, although I haven't gotten much this last year because life has been crazy, I love that, like, you can go and you can be like a black belt, but you're still learning, and I think when we look at like athletes and like professional sports, we're like, oh, they're the elite, which they are for sure. You hear those things about like Olympics where people are like, oh, they're running so slow. And you're like spectators are like, oh, that guy's so slow. And it's like, okay, you go run next to him and tell me how slow he is, but I think that when we think of like, oh, I want to work in a place with professional athletes, it's like, yes, that's so great. But like that elite athlete was not a professional athlete at one point in their life too, and so just kind of for me, jiu-jitsu, getting into that in Albuquerque, Albuquerque has the Isotopes, which is like the Rockies minor league, one of the Rocky, like, and then they have United, which is a major league soccer team. But really, MMA is so big down there, and you can.
Oh no. You froze just a smidget. Hopefully she'll pop back in. Sometimes this happens, right? We're live and people freeze and that happens and that's okay. So hopefully she will pop back in here, but I'm going to give it a second and see if I can get her back. Hey, that's live TV. That's what happens sometimes. All right, now I think she's back. Let's see. Okay.
I have no idea what happened. It's so weird.
That's okay. You froze for a minute, but we just keep going on. It's like
yeah. That's okay. I was going on a tangent anyway, so that was like probably like God's way of being like, Krista, get to the point. Like, but like, so with MMA, I was just saying in Albuquerque, there's MMA is so big, and really to go pro in MMA, you just kind of need to declare it. Kind of, you're just like going pro, like I'm doing a pro, and there's other things that go into that, obviously, but so I think it is kind of interesting to see the difference in sports, and like when people tell me like, oh, I want to work with like elite athletes, I love that. I love working with elite athletes too. But I think that I just come from this place that like athletes are people to me. So, you're at this level and there's different demands at different levels. And I think if it's just like you said, like if you're a CEO or you're just entering the company, like you're still people, like, but you have different demands. So I think I always love when people are like, I want to work with elite athletes. I'm like, me too, but that elite athlete was a peewee soccer player at some point too, so I love supporting all stages for sure.
Yeah, so my son is actually in MMA, and
nice.
He keeps ranking up in the belts, and he's at a high brown right now, and so he definitely is feeling like sometimes there's this pressure of like being the best, but then also of course they're all little, so none of them really fully understand it.
Right.
But it is like it's this confidence building mechanism, and they all started at white belts,
right?
And as you get more and more trained and better at what you're doing, you advance in the belts, and it's a great reward, especially when they are younger. But I love what you said too, is that we're constantly learning, and I think that's just really across the board, whether you're a coach, whether you're an athlete, an elite athlete. If you're, I had a guest on that we were kind of talking about this too, and one of my mentors, she always says everybody poops.
Yes.
Like that has stuck with me for so long, because there's been such a space, even for me, like as the founder of my nonprofit, that I didn't feel like I was good enough or as good as whomever you put into that space. And now that just plays over and over in my head every time I meet somebody, and I'm like, they're not any better than me. They started at the same place I did,
Yeah.
And I think that's especially important with athletes is we all have to start somewhere. You're not
Oh,
going to
for
just
sure.
come
Yeah.
out, be born and be like
Yeah.
the best athlete
Yeah.
ever.
Right.
It takes time. It takes
Yeah.
training. It takes space. It takes us to open our mind to the possibility of maybe I need at this moment. It's not about how hard I work. It's not about how much I train. It's not about just pushing through it. Maybe there's a space that they need a coach or they
Mhm.
need a counselor to be able to up level where they're at.
Yeah.
And instead of just pushing through, like, how can we create
Right.
this conversation around it being okay?
Right. Like it should just be like kind of standard, right? That like, oh, this is just a part of training, like I love what you said. Like I love that too. Cause isn't there like a book called that or like a kid's book or something? I love that. It's so funny. But I always look like at athletes too, like, the most elite athlete out there, in whatever sport. It's like, are they better at me at that sport? Of course. Like, duh. Do they have these skills? Yeah, this is great, but whenever I like come across someone that, I think culture wants us to like have this like leveling, like top down type, schema or whatever. To me, I just try to look at people as like, okay, like what can I learn from them? Because clearly, like there are therapists that have been therapists way longer than I have, and so it's not a like, oh, they're a better therapist. It's like, oh wow, what can they teach me? And then also vice versa. Maybe I can offer them something in return as well, when we're like in that professional space. Because I think that's why for me it's like they're just people, like they have kids or they have this is their job, so they obviously have a job, so job stability is probably concerned sometimes, and there's just things that I think that we forget about this population, and that's why for me it's so important that we serve it, because I had a professor that served like military families, and she did a bunch of research on, and I love that, that is a whole family system that is different than like a civilian family, and so for me it's like, why don't we treat athletes like what there's different pressures that they face, or even performers, like you're saying, like executives and stuff. There's different pressures that they face. So we need to like come alongside and just say, hey, you're under a lot of pressure. Here I am. Like it's not. And that's the thing too, is, I have my specialties. And then I have things that I will work with depending on the situation. But if someone were to come to me with like pretty severe eating disorder, I'm not going to be the therapist for them, but I can help them in finding someone for them, and I think that's another thing too, is that I think we get in this mindset of as professionals, like, oh, I got to be the one. I want to work with these, and it's like, I can't work with everyone, I can't serve like everyone, and I'm not going to be everyone's style either. And so, it's really important for me to like come alongside other therapists and be like, hey, I have a client that's struggling with this, and I'd love for you to talk to them, and, vice versa. And I think if we can kind of merge more there too and gain a little bit more support in that community, I think it would be really good too for athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is important to know, is that there are and main reason why I have the show is that there are so many resources out there. Sometimes we just don't know about them.
Yeah.
And the best part is that most and everybody that I've ever talked to, we're all in the space of giving to each other and being
Yeah.
able to collaborate. It's not a competition. It's
Yeah.
about how can we help others? How can we be that guide? And if I'm not the right person for you, that's okay.
Yes.
And if you're not, that's okay. And we have to also anybody that's watching this, if you do go to somebody and they're not your cup of tea, I promise you there are more out there also.
Yes.
And you could probably ask that person, hey, I respect you.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like we match, which is usually most of the time okay, especially in this space. And
Yeah.
they can help find somebody else that works.
Yeah, if your therapist or coach has a problem with you saying like, hey, thanks for being with me, but I think I'm gonna like, can you help me find, I don't know if this is the right fit or whatever. That's a them problem. That's not a you problem. Like stand up for yourself because, that like, especially, coaching and counseling, they're different, but like it can be a vulnerable space. And so, I would rather a client feel real safe, really comfortable with me and like be able to actually do some processing and some work. And I use brain spotting a lot with my clients. And if you're not feeling safe, you're probably not going to be able to engage with it. So if you can't feel safe and like comfortable with your therapist, then move on because that's okay. Like I never take it personally. I always like, I'm always open to, I'd rather help someone find a better fit or something that's going to work for them because ultimately, our job is to help people and it doesn't matter how that looks as long as like they're getting the help they need. If it's in my office or it's with a person that I referred them to, that's the ultimate goal, right? And yeah, I agree with you. If you've had a bad experience in therapy and you're watching this, try someone else. Give it another go because it might have been just not the right fit. It's just like a relationship,
Yes.
Yeah.
So if somebody does want to work with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so you can reach out on my website. I have like my email. Oh yeah, it's right there. Oh, look at you. You're on it. Yeah, speakstonecc.com. And you can shoot me an email there or there's our phone number on there too. And call or text. Either one's, I know people are busy. I get it. Sometimes a text is easier. So I do offer like a 15-minute free phone call. We can talk and just kind of see if this is a good fit. I'm like on Instagram or LinkedIn, but probably the website's going to be where you're going to want to go.
Nice. Well, any final words that you would like to share?
No, just like, thank you so much for having me on. And I'm so excited to just have these conversations. And, I think there's more conversations to be had. And I just love having the space to do that. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Bye.
All right, y'all. That was another amazing episode of Make Mental Health Matter. Again, on Mondays, I talk to guests who are either professionals in the mental health space, advocates of mental health, or those with lived experience. I also do Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And that is really the space for when I talk to the warriors, those people that have been in situations or are still going through situations in their life and really bringing those stories to you so that you can identify maybe with what they're going through. Maybe it would be helpful for somebody else, but really guiding into that hope space. So whichever episode, hopefully you watch all of them. One of the biggest goals that I have with this show, with my nonprofit and everything in general is really the education piece, the resources, the tools, what I can provide to you as the audience so that you are able to share it with a friend that might be going through similar, or maybe you're going through, and you can reach out to any of my guests at any point in time. But also that education piece. If you've ever gone onto BCC Evolution's website and you saw our vision really is to educate 1 million people by 2030. And that can be through this show. It can be through our classes that we offer. It could be through me speaking, going on other people's podcasts, being on other people's stages, being on our own stages. That really is how we evaluate how many people we really truly are educating through mental health and suicide prevention. And one of the exciting parts about having this show is that we reach thousands of people now. Really exciting that we have shifted this platform from just YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and over to the E360 TV platform that goes out to Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, Android, Google, Periscope, Twitch. I don't even know. There's so many that I'm like, there's a whole bunch. But the cool part about that is I also get analytics. And I was just talking to somebody earlier in E360 about the analytics, and we're reaching on average 4,000 people at least per show, or per month, if I read it correctly. Numbers not really my thing, but that's okay. But we're getting to the 5,000, which is really incredible to have a base of people that are watching. And what I want to offer to you, which is something that I haven't done in a little while, is I want you to know that first and foremost, the whole goal is that you're not alone. And there are lots and lots of people out there that want to help you and want to process and give you tools and tricks. And then also BCC Evolution, we offer a whole bunch of resources on our website, including our 7 strategies for mental wellness and our personal safety and self-care plan. So all you have to do is go to, it's over here, bccevolution.org. On the very first page, you can find our download towards the bottom, and download our strategies and the personal safety and self-care plan. There are some brief instructions how to fill that out. There's also a masterclass that you can take that even goes more in detail. But ultimately, that plan is to give you a tool to be able to take care of yourself. Maybe you are somebody who experiences suicidal ideations. Maybe you're somebody who has or experiences depression, anxiety, any of those other mental health challenges that come up, substance use. This really is a plan that you can write down. Who are those 3 people that have your back no matter what? And when I talk about that, what I say is that make sure you have a conversation with that person before you put them on your list, so that they know that they are your person, that you can come to at any point in time if you need help at any hour. I know personally, I'm not your 2 a.m. person unless you absolutely need me. And we have that conversation and you say, Kelly, I need you to be my person. Okay, that puts you in a different group on my phone so that your phone calls will come through no matter what time it is. That's what I'm talking about, is that you have to start having these conversations, not just writing down random people's names, but really having that conversation around, I need you. And when I'm at the lowest of my low, you're my person or one of my people. And if you're not available, then I'm going to go to the next. And if they're not available, I'm going to go to the next. And if all those 3 people happen to not be available, which most likely at least one of them will, there's also a part at the very bottom to add resources, whether that is 988, which is now the National Suicide Hotline. You can call it, you can text it, you can even go to their website and chat with them. Or maybe it's not a crisis and you just need somebody to listen to. On BCC Evolution, we also have more resources like 7cups.com. They have listeners 24/7 and it's all chat. There's also our Circle support group that we do after this show. It's actually at 12:30 at Mountain Daylight Time. We're in daylight time. Mountain Time. I'm just going to start using Mountain Time. That's going to be easier for me. Where I have a group called Never Alone Through Grief and Loss. And we don't just talk about grief and loss. We talk about all different things. Sometimes people come in and they have something that happened during the day, or maybe we're giving tools and strategies around mental wellness, or really just understanding grief and loss a little bit more. Or maybe you had something pop up that you need extra support around. The best thing about the Circles platform is it's voices only. So you don't have to be pretty with a camera or feel vulnerable by people looking at you. It's just your voice. You can also listen in. You don't necessarily have to even talk. So all of this information can, again, be found on bccevolution.org. And I am currently in the process of building our trusted resource hub. It's information and people that I have had access to for years and years and years. Now we're just putting it in a centrally located place on the website that will give you online resources, people resources, professionals, holistic, crisis and non-crisis resources, all in one space. And that is the initiative that BCC Evolution and myself are really in the process of right now, because I know how hard or challenging it can be to find those resources when you need them the most. So how cool would that be to just have a space that you can go that has all of, or some of them for you? I'm not going to have all of them, but I will have those that I have vetted, that I trust, that I know will be helpful, not harmful. That is my biggest mission in life, is I always want to make sure whomever I'm referring, even as we talk today, whomever I'm referring out to is going to be helpful and not hurtful. So that is my promise to you, that anybody that goes on our website will absolutely be vetted out and they will be helpful, not harmful. There is also ways, if you are somebody who watches this that is a professional in this space, that you can become part of our trusted resource hub. So you can also go and find out all of that information there too. And normally I don't fully wrap it up this way, but I really wanted to, because I had a little extra time. But I think it's important for you as the audience to understand why I do the show in general. And I love the fact that we can bring on different people that specialize in different areas. So again, if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe, add us to your favorites, add us to your watch list. I don't know what it's called, but whatever you do, join me back this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time for another amazing episode of Make Mental Health Matter. Bye, y'all.